It's kind of crazy when you think about it. Like, how many logins and passwords
Mhm.
we use every day,
Yeah, it's a lot.
right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And then think about a whole company,
Yeah.
you know, using all these different cloud services.
Yeah.
How do they even keep track of everyone and what they can access?
It's a huge challenge. And that's where identity management comes in. It's essential these days.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Absolutely. For this deep dive, we're zeroing in on Azure Active Directory, or Azure AD for short. It's kind of like the central nervous system for so many businesses when it comes to managing who can access their stuff online, whether those folks are inside the organization or sometimes even outside.
Right. You've got employees, you've got partners, you've got vendors. How do you make sure the right people have access to the right things
Yeah.
and only the right things?
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Azure AD. It gives you that granular control. And thankfully, we've got some great material to walk through today that really breaks down the core components of how all of this works.
So our mission today is to make all of this clear and understandable. So you, our listener, can really grasp the ins and outs of managing identities in the Azure world.
Think of it as a guided tour through the essential landscape of Azure AD user and identity management.
We're going to cover a lot of ground, from securely bringing external partners into the fold to setting up users who live entirely in the cloud. From managing hundreds of accounts at once to connecting your existing on-premises setup, you know, that old-school Active Directory server in the back room, connecting that to the cloud.
And it's not just about individuals either. We'll dig into how to manage whole groups of users, which is honestly a lifesaver when you're trying to control access to resources.
We'll also tackle those situations where you have multiple Azure environments to juggle, which honestly can be a bit of a headache. And then there's those all-important solutions for collaborating with other businesses and engaging with your customers securely, of course.
All within the Azure ecosystem.
So, ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right, we'll start with slide 1, managing Azure AD user accounts and identity. This slide is like our roadmap for today's conversation.
It's the headline. It's telling us what we're about to explore. It gives you, the listener, a really clear overview of what to expect. We're talking about managing those Azure AD accounts effectively and how to handle all these different identities within your organization.
Right off the bat, it mentions managing external vendors, which is a big deal for so many companies that work with outside partners and contractors these days.
Huge, especially in today's collaborative business world.
It also mentions adding cloud identities for your internal team. For those folks who might not have traditional on-premises accounts, like if they work remotely or primarily use cloud-based tools.
More and more common these days.
Then there's the bulk user operations. Like imagine having to add hundreds of new employees one by one. Yikes. That's where this feature comes in. You can literally cut down onboarding time from days to hours.
A total game changer when you're dealing with a large influx of new users.
And we can't forget about Azure AD Connect. This one's essential for any company that already has that on-premises Active Directory server and wants to seamlessly connect it to Azure AD in the cloud to create that unified hybrid identity experience.
Yeah, it's the bridge between the old and the new, the on-premises and the cloud.
And then we've got group management, which is all about simplifying how you control access to resources, and multi-directory administration, which might sound a little intimidating, but we'll break it down. And finally, those B2B and B2C solutions that allow you to securely interact with business partners and customers. It's all here, right on slide 1.
It's really a promise to the listener that by the end of this deep dive, they'll have a solid grasp of Azure AD's identity management capabilities and how to leverage those capabilities for their specific organization.
Okay, onwards to slide 2. This one's titled Managing External User Accounts, Adding Cloud Identities, User Management Considerations. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of adding users to Azure AD.
And right away, we see that Azure AD gives you multiple ways to do this. The slide mentions the Azure portal, which is your one-stop shop for pretty much everything Azure related.
Right. If you're already in there managing your virtual machines or something, you can pop over and add a user.
Then there's the Office 365 Admin Center. That one's more focused on the productivity suite, but naturally it overlaps with user management too.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Then we've got the Microsoft Intune Admin Console for managing devices and applications, which of course ties into user identities as well. And last but not least, there's the Command Line Interface, or CLI.
Yeah, for the automation folks, the ones who like to script things out.
So you've got options.
You really do.
Now, when it comes to actually bringing a user into the system, what are the main approaches?
Well, you can create a brand new account from scratch. This is usually what you do for internal users, or when you need to create a completely new identity within your Azure AD.
Makes sense.
The other option is to send an invitation. This is especially useful when you're working with external partners or vendors, and you don't necessarily want to create a whole new account for them within your directory. You can just invite them to access the specific resources they need.
Like a temporary access pass.
Exactly. And the cool thing is you can actually personalize those invitation messages. Makes it a little more welcoming for your guests, you know.
Definitely a nice touch.
Oh.
Now, something that jumped out at me on this slide is the part about administrative roles.
Oh, yeah, that's huge from a security standpoint.
It says that only global administrators have the permissions to manage users, which makes sense. You don't want just anyone creating or deleting accounts willy-nilly.
Absolutely. It's all about that principle of least privilege. Only the people who absolutely need those elevated permissions should have them.
Right. It's like the keys to the kingdom. You got to be careful who you give those to. The slide also mentions the optional user profile details. Things like profile pictures, job titles, and contact info. It seems like a small thing, but I imagine it can actually be really helpful, especially in larger organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes things so much easier. If you can see at a glance who someone is, what they do, how to get in touch with them.
It adds context, makes the digital workspace feel a little more human.
A little less like you're interacting with just a bunch of usernames.
Okay. There's also a mention of the 30-day restoration period for deleted users. That seems like a good safety net, just in case someone accidentally deletes an account.
Oh, it's a lifesaver. We've all been there, hitting that delete button a little too quickly, and then realizing, uh-oh, I need that back.
And then there's the sign-in and audit logs, always available. Essential for security and compliance. You need to know who's accessing what and when.
Absolutely. It's all about accountability and being able to track activity. In case something goes wrong, you need that audit trail.
And finally, removing external vendor or contractor accounts when they're no longer needed. Another critical piece of the security puzzle.
Yeah, you don't want those accounts hanging around after someone has left the company or finished their project. It's just asking for trouble.
So, from slide 2, we've learned about the flexibility in how you add users, the importance of those administrative roles, the value of having those detailed user profiles, and the absolute necessity of managing access carefully, especially for external users.
A lot of good stuff packed into that one slide.
On to slide 3, bulk user management. Now, this sounds like something that could save a ton of time and headaches, especially for larger organizations.
It is. It's all about efficiency. When you need to add a large number of users, or update them, or even delete them, doing it one by one just isn't practical.
I can imagine.
So Azure AD has this bulk operation feature, and it all starts with the CSV template, which you download right from the Azure portal.
Okay, so step 1, navigate to Azure Active Directory in the portal. Then go to Users, then Bulk Options, and finally, Bulk Create. Seems pretty straightforward.
It is. It walks you right through it, and then you get this CSV template file, which is basically a spreadsheet with specific columns for different user attributes.
So things like their username, their password, their name, their job title, department, location, that kind of stuff.
Right. And some of these fields are required, like the username and the actual login name they'll use. But there are also a bunch of optional fields.
And the slide points out that filling in those optional fields right away can save you a lot of hassle later on.
It's true. It's like front-loading the work. So you don't have to go back and manually add all that info for each user later. Once you've filled out that CSV template, you just upload it through the portal. And Azure AD does the rest. Creates all those user accounts in one go.
Boom. Done.
Like magic.
Now, the slide also talks about naming conventions and using a consistent format for usernames and display names and email aliases. Why is that so important?
Consistency is key. It makes everything so much more organized and easier to manage. Imagine trying to find a specific user in a directory of thousands of people if everyone's username was totally random and unpredictable. It would be a nightmare.
Right. It's like trying to find a book in a library with no organizational system. Total chaos. So slide 3 is all about efficiency through bulk user management and the importance of those consistent naming conventions. Good stuff.
Really important stuff.
Okay, let's move on to slide 4. This one's titled Office 365 Microsoft 365 Groups. And it's all about managing groups of users rather than individuals.
Right. So this slide introduces two main types of groups: Office 365, Microsoft 365 groups. They're pretty much interchangeable these days. And then security groups.
Okay. 2 flavors of groups.
Let's start with Office 365 groups. They're all about collaboration. Their main purpose is to manage access to shared resources, things like group mailboxes, shared calendars, files in SharePoint, even a whole SharePoint sites.
So if you have a team that needs to work together on a project, they can all be part of an Office 365 group. And they'll have access to the same resources.
Exactly. It streamlines collaboration. And what's cool is that regular users can typically create these groups themselves. They don't need special admin rights. And they can even include people from outside the organization.
Oh, really? So you could have a project with external vendors, and they could be part of the same group as your internal team.
Absolutely. Makes things so much easier. Now, security groups, they have a different focus. They're all about managing permissions.
Okay, so like controlling who can access certain applications or data.
Right. You can add users to a security group and then grant that group specific permissions. It's way more efficient than assigning permissions to each individual user separately.
Makes sense. And the slide mentions that creating and managing these security groups usually requires admin rights, which makes sense. You don't want just anyone messing with those permissions.
It's definitely not.
So, Office 365 groups, all about collaboration, easy to create, can include external folks, security groups, all about managing permissions, requires admin rights. Got it.
2 important tools in the Azure AD arsenal.
Now, slide 5 dives a little deeper into group membership, the different ways that users and even devices can become part of a group.
Yeah. We've got assigned membership, dynamic user membership, and dynamic device membership.
Okay. Break it down for me. What's assigned membership?
That's the simplest one. It's manual. You, as the admin or the group owner, manually add specific users to the group, and they inherit all the permissions and access rights that come with that group. This is a good option for groups where the membership is pretty static, doesn't change much.
So like a leadership team or a long-term project group.
Exactly. Now, dynamic user membership, that's where things get a little more interesting. This uses dynamic rules that automatically add or remove users based on certain attributes in their user profile.
Like their department or their job title.
Yeah, or their location, or even custom attributes that you've defined. And those attributes can change.
Right.
Someone gets promoted, they switch departments, they move to a different office, and the system automatically updates their group membership based on those changes. Super efficient.
I can see how that would be a huge time saver.
Yeah.
And help to keep those group memberships accurate, especially in a large organization where things are constantly changing.
Absolutely. And dynamic user membership works for both types of groups, Office 365 groups and security groups. Very versatile.
Now, what about dynamic device membership? That sounds intriguing.
This one's similar to dynamic user membership, but it applies to devices instead of users, and it only works with security groups. So you set up rules based on device attributes, like the operating system version, or whether the device is compliant with your security policies, or who owns the device. And if a device meets those criteria, it's automatically added to the group, and it inherits those permissions.
So you could have a security group for all devices that are running a specific version of Windows and automatically apply certain security policies to them.
Precisely. It's a powerful way to manage access and security at the device level.
Slide 5. All about the flexibility of group membership, from manual assignments to those automated dynamic rules. Really interesting stuff. Now let's move on to slide 6. Azure AD Connect. This one seems crucial for organizations that already have an on-premises Active Directory setup.
It is. It's the bridge between the on-premises world and the cloud. Azure AD Connect allows you to synchronize your on-premises Active Directory with your Azure AD tenant, so users can use the same credentials to access resources both locally and in the cloud.
So it's all about creating that unified identity experience,
Yeah.
whether you're working in the office or remotely.
Exactly. And it starts with downloading and installing the Azure AD Connect software. You can get it right from the Azure portal or from the Microsoft Download Center. And you typically install it on a server in your on-premises environment, ideally on a domain controller.
Makes sense. And once you've got it installed, the Azure AD Connect wizard walks you through the process of connecting your local Active Directory to your Azure AD tenant securely. Of course.
Security is paramount. And once that connection is established, you've got a bunch of options for how you want to synchronize the data.
The slide mentions password hash sync, pass-through authentication, group write-back, device write-back, and selective OU synchronization. That's a lot of options.
It is. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Password hash sync takes a cryptographic hash of the user's passwords from your on-premises Active Directory and synchronizes that with Azure AD. So the users can use the same password in both environments, but the actual password itself never leaves your on-premises environment.
Okay, so that's good from a security standpoint. What about pass-through authentication? How's that different?
With pass-through authentication, when a user tries to log in, their authentication request is actually sent back to your on-premises domain controllers for validation in real time.
So their credentials are still being checked against that on-premises server,
Yeah.
even though they're trying to access something in the cloud.
That's right. And then we've got group write-back, which allows certain groups managed in Azure AD to be written back to your on-premises Active Directory so they can be managed there. And device write-back does the same thing, but for devices, synchronizing information about Azure AD registered devices back to your on-premises environment.
Interesting. So it can go both ways. And finally, selective OU synchronization. What's that all about?
That gives you granular control over which parts of your on-premises Active Directory get synchronized with Azure AD. So you can choose to exclude certain users or groups if you need to.
Okay, so lots of flexibility to fine-tune that synchronization process.
Exactly. You can tailor it to your specific requirements and your security policies. And then the slide mentions health monitoring with Azure AD Connect Health. This is a really important aspect.
What does that entail?
Azure AD Connect Health provides centralized monitoring of your key on-premises identity components, like your domain controllers and your Azure AD Connect server itself.
So it's like a health checkup for your identity infrastructure.
It's constantly monitoring things,
Right.
looking for potential issues, like if the synchronization process fails or if there are authentication problems. And it alerts you if it finds anything, so you can address those issues proactively before they cause any major disruptions.
That's great. So slide 6 really emphasizes the key role that Azure AD Connect plays in that hybrid identity world, connecting your on-premises setup with the cloud and providing the tools to manage and monitor that connection.
Now, on to slide 7. Managing multiple directories. Sounds like we're getting to some more complex territory here.
We are. As organizations grow or merge or have different business units with different needs, they might end up with multiple Azure AD tenants to manage.
Right, not everything fits neatly into one box. And this slide is all about understanding the relationship, or rather the lack of relationship, between those different tenants. The key takeaway here is that each Azure AD tenant is completely independent. It's its own little island.
No parent-child relationship?
Nope, none. They're all peers. So one tenant can't control another tenant. They each have their own set of resources, their own administrators, their own configuration. Everything is separate.
Okay, so resource independence. That means that whatever you create in one tenant, whether it's user accounts or applications or virtual machines, it doesn't affect any other tenant.
Right. It's like they're in completely different universes. And you can't even share domain names across tenants. So if you've got contesto.com for one tenant, you can't use that same domain for another tenant. Got to keep things clean and separate.
Makes sense. What about the administrative side of things?
Same story. Administrative independence. The admin roles and permissions that you set up in one tenant have no effect on any other tenant. So someone who's a global administrator in tenant A, they've got no power in tenant B.
Okay, so you really have to manage each tenant individually. There's no central control panel that lets you manage everything from one place.
Right. Each tenant is its own silo. And finally, synchronization independence. Each tenant is configured separately for synchronizing with your on-premises Active Directory. So you could have different sync policies for each tenant, different connected directories, different sets of objects that are being synced. You can tailor it to the specific needs of each environment.
Slide 7. Multiple directories, multiple islands, each one independent. Got it. Now, let's talk about collaboration. Slide 8 is Azure AD B2B collaboration, all about working with external partners securely.
Right. Azure AD B2B, business to business. It's specifically designed for sharing your company's applications and services with guest users from other organizations and doing it securely.
So I could invite a vendor to access a specific application that we use to manage projects, but I wouldn't have to create a whole new user account for them within our Azure AD.
That's right. You can grant them access to just the resources they need and nothing more. And the beautiful thing is that they can use their own existing work or school account to log in.
So they don't have to remember another set of credentials.
Exactly. It's super convenient for them. And it reduces the administrative burden on your IT team.
Everyone wins. And the slide mentions a simplified invitation process. What does that usually involve?
Typically, you send an invitation to the guest user's email address, and they receive an email with instructions on how to redeem the invitation and access the resources. They just have to authenticate using their own organizational credentials. Super straightforward.
And for more complex scenarios, the slide mentions Azure AD B2B APIs.
Right. For the developers out there, they can use those APIs to customize the invitation process, or even build self-service sign-up portals if you need something a little more sophisticated.
Okay, so flexibility is the name of the game. So Azure AD B2B is all about secure and streamlined collaboration with external partners. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about engaging with your customers. Slide 9 is Azure AD B2C Identity Management. This one seems different.
It is. B2C stands for business to customer, and it's specifically designed for managing customer identities. It's basically an identity platform, but for your customers, so they can use their preferred identity to access your applications or APIs.
So they could use their Facebook account, or their Google account,
Right.
or their corporate credentials if they have them, or create a local account specifically for your app.
Exactly. Gives them options.
Yeah.
And it makes the sign-in process much smoother for them. No need to remember yet another username and password. And the platform is built for serious scale.
The slide mentions enterprise-scale security.
It can handle millions of users, billions of authentications. And it's got built-in protection against all those common security threats, like DDoS attacks, password spraying, brute force attempts. You don't have to worry about setting up all that stuff yourself.
Peace of mind.
Exactly. And then there's the identity verification piece.
What's that all about?
So during the sign-up process, Azure AD B2C can collect certain data from the user and then send that data to third-party verification systems to make sure it's all legit, to prevent fraudulent accounts.
So it's like an extra layer of security to make sure the person signing up is really who they say they are.
Right. It helps to build trust.
Yeah.
So, slide 9, Azure AD B2C. It's all about providing a secure and user-friendly identity experience for your customers while protecting your applications and your data.
Okay. That brings us to the end of our slide deck.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We explored the ins and outs of managing user accounts and identities in Azure AD, from the basics of adding users to those powerful bulk operations, from managing groups to connecting your on-premises environment to the cloud with Azure AD Connect.
We talked about handling multiple Azure AD tenants and the complexities that come with that. And we looked at those essential tools for collaborating with external partners and managing customer identities.
It's clear that Azure AD is so much more than just a directory of users. It's a cornerstone of security, collaboration, and customer engagement in the cloud. It's foundational.
Absolutely. It's the backbone of so much of what organizations are doing today.
So, listener, as you think about everything we've discussed today, I want you to consider this. How might these same principles of identity management be applied outside of the traditional walls of an organization? How about in the broader world of business partnerships, customer relationships, even in the realm of personal digital identity?
It's an evolving landscape, and it's fascinating to think about where it's all headed, what new possibilities and what new challenges might lie ahead.
Identity is a big deal, and it's only going to get bigger.
It really is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.